Welcome to Goobertown Hobbies. My name is Brent. Today we're going to make a fabulous Space Marine. This is going to be a modern incarnation of the Rainbow Warriors from Rogue Trader. For even more Oldhammer goodness, we're going to use a giant metal Space Marine model from the old 54mm Inquisitor game. Anything goes on this project. I'm using all of my tools and all of my colors to make something special and a little bit silly. A whole bunch of lovely creators are marking Pride Month with a digital parade of fabulous Marines. This project and this collaboration is a light-hearted celebration. But of course, Pride Month is also a time to acknowledge the challenges faced by our friends and family and neighbors. So we're running a fundraiser for the Trevor Project, an organization that runs a crisis hotline for young people under 25 in the LGBTQ+ community. More on that later. Let's focus on this Rainbow Warrior. First, I needed to pick a model and convert them so that they're ready for a celebration. The rules for this collaboration are loose. The model doesn't even have to be a Marine, but I've got enough around here so that it might as well be. I had to think about it for a while, but eventually I remembered my bag of second-hand Inquisitor models. These are larger metal models in a 54mm scale. I got all of these models off of Craigslist. Several of the Inquisitor models were complete, and they went into my roulette bags a few years ago. The Robo-Mastiff actually got drawn and painted for a roulette episode. Eisenhorn himself went to Ninjon. And many others stayed in this plastic bag because they seemed to be missing parts. One that has always grabbed my attention is this big Marine model. He's missing his head and hands, but it appears to be Artemis. This is a really cool hunk of metal. It's even bigger than the other Inquisitor models. I guess they tried to make the human and Space Marine scaling more accurate in this game. His size makes it even funnier that he has a dynamic pose on a puny 40mm base. Even though I don't have the bit for his head, I still think I'm gonna call him Artemis and use he and him for pronouns. Since the last time I went poking around in this bag of Inquisitor models, I've learned how to use a 3D printer. So we can give this Marine any helmet and any hands that we want. The head was easy. The Rainbow Warrior Marines from Rogue Trader had beaky helmets. I found a variant with a wreath sculpted onto it that I think will be fun to paint. The hands were a harder decision. Bolter rifles and chain swords aren't really appropriate for this kind of parade. We're looking for ways to make this guy a bit more fun and a bit less violent. Lightning claws could be done in fun colors, like pointy little glow sticks. Artemis scissor hands could be a dancing sensation. I also like the idea of his raised right hand pointing at something. It invokes Techno-Viking in the best way. Alternatively, power fists are an option. I found poses for closed fist, open hand, and pointing. Power fists are great for cracking tank armor, but they're also big silly gloves. Again, I like having at least one of them pointing. It reminds me a little of a big foam finger. And you know what? That's perfect. 2 pointing power fists, like he's double fisting foam fingers at a sports game. And there's our model. I think we can go ahead and start painting. Recently I've had blue Marines on my mind. Someday I'll paint a force of Marines to play some games with, but I always seem to get paralyzed when I try to pick a chapter. Lately, I've been really enamored with this blue color scheme. Perhaps Crimson Fists, or perhaps a custom chapter. I still haven't made a commitment, but this color recipe will be perfect for a base coat on this big Rainbow Warrior. I fired up my air compressor and started with a coat of black primer. From there, I switched to white acrylic ink to do some highlighting. This goes on nice and smooth, and it allows me to make some nice transitions from black in the shadows up through gray to nearly white on the high points. I was patient with this and put on multiple thin coats to build up the contrast. Once I was satisfied with the black and white, it was time for this phthalo blue ink. This is supposed to be a transparent ink, but just a tiny drop can give an incredibly potent blue. Very slowly, I put a blue filter over the whole model. The black parts of the model stay dark, but the parts highlighted with white take on that vibrant blue. Again, I'm being patient and putting on a few thin coats. Once the blue was dry, I used a satin varnish to protect all the work that we've done so far. These thin layers of ink applied through the airbrush can be a bit delicate, so it pays to protect them before we move on to the next steps. The next day, when the varnish was nice and hard, I got out my paintbrush and started to do the steps that I'd do for any other Space Marine model. First, black paint for the under armor that shows through at the joints. Next, a bit of black contrast paint to black line between the armor plates. For panel lining, I find that contrast paint is a decent compromise between the flow of Nuln Oil and the pigment strength of regular black paint. After enhancing the cracks and shadows, it's time to enhance the highlights. I'm using a bright blue to edge highlight everything, the same way I would for an ordinary Space Marine. Now onto the details. Parchment and wax for the purity seals. A bit of steel here and there, and then it's time for the rainbows. In Rogue Trader, the Rainbow Warriors have a rainbow stripe that runs along the center of their helmet from the crest down to the beak. That's tricky to paint. For my variant, I'm going to paint the leaves on the wreath. The leaves are nice and discreet, so it's easy for me to count and plan how many of each color that I want. I figure the wings on his chest plate are another good place to put a rainbow. For the rainbow, I made sure to find the most vibrant, classic, and fun hue of each color that I could. I took my time carefully laying on each color. The wreath especially is gonna be a focal point for this model, and I think it's gonna look great. I did a bit of black lining between the leaves of the wreath and the feathers on the wings to really make things look crispy. Our Marine is starting to look pretty sharp. This collaboration was started by Giggling Geekette and some of the other lovely folks over on Twitch. The tag is Fabulous Marines 2021. I was able to block out Fab 2021 there on its right shoulder pad, but there's still a lot of blank space. For better or for worse, his left shoulder is full of inquisitorial iconography. Ordinarily, Inquisitors are not much fun at parades, but we're doing our best to look past all those skull emblems and dress Artemis for the occasion. I'm gonna try to use that blank space on his right shoulder pad for a transgender pride flag. Since this is a larger model, I think it might be possible to use masking tape to make a striped flag. I'm using tiny strips of masking tape to make a rectangle the size I want it, and I'm using bigger strips of masking tape to protect the rest of the model. I found some shades of Vallejo air paint that I liked, and I got to work. First, a large rectangle of baby blue. Then, I moved the masking tape to protect some of that blue and make a smaller rectangle of baby pink. Then I moved the masking tape again and put down a line of white in the center of the flag. And here's the moment of truth. Time to pull off the masking tape and see if this worked. I'm hoping that the adhesive on the tape doesn't damage the original blue paint job or any of the flag colors that we just put down. And you know what? This isn't too bad. The shape is a little bit wonky, but considering how curved that shoulder pad is, I think it turned out great. I'm ready to try making flags on his power fists now. One of the reasons that I picked pointing power fists is that they remind me of those big foam fingers at sporting events. The Goobertown Goobers are #1. You can tell because we're holding up one big finger. #1, baby. So these big hands will not be blank. I'm using my masking tape to mark off some more flags. There are lots of great reasons to celebrate our bi friends and our pan friends. But I chose these two flags in particular because they each only have 3 stripes, and I'm not confident with this masking tape yet. The hands on this mini are less curved than the shoulder pads, so I am optimistic that we can get this to work. For each hand, I sprayed a big rectangle, then a smaller rectangle, and then a smaller rectangle. And here we are at the moment of truth again. Careful, careful. One of them turned out pretty well, and the other one took just a little bit of damage, but it was easy enough to fix it up with a brush. Once I did some minor repair to the paint job, it was time for another coat of varnish. Again, I'm using some Vallejo satin varnish. You can varnish at any point during a paint job, and it's a bit like hitting the save button to lock in the progress that you've made. By now, the marine is getting very close to completion. There's just a few last touches to make. Whoops, I knocked over the model and his hand fell off. The weight distribution on this tiny base isn't great. I can't imagine what actually playing the Inquisitor game must have been like. Getting him on a better base is a priority. First though, I'm realizing that his necklace is missing a pendant. Let's see what we can find. Electronic scanner thing? Maybe. Melt-a-bomb? Maybe. Nunchucks? Maybe. Giant eagle? Very tempting. Nah, I'm gonna be boring and give him another ribbon. Artemis here is a winner. We'll give him a nice blue ribbon with some gold script that says he's a winner. And here we go. All done except for the base. Artemis is looking sharp. His legs are a bit bare compared to the rest of his paint scheme, but that might all balance out once we get a real base on there. Now I've got a crazy idea for that base. This is meant to be part of a pride parade, and I think there's a way to straight up turn Artemis into a parade float. I have these nasty old rhinos that I was using as test models for this blue color scheme. I'm gonna stick Artemis on one of these and decorate it like a parade float. I snipped off the old 40mm base, being careful not to bend or weaken that one pin sticking out of the ball of his foot. Then I drilled a hole into the rhino and got our big fabulous marine glued on down. This base is gonna be much sturdier. And if it isn't, we can always fill the inside of the rhino with sand to make sure it never falls over ever again. Parade floats are often covered in a bed of flowers, so I went into my collection of dried plants and pulled out a few things that might suit. Primarily, I have these tiny white flowers that I really like. I'm gonna try to get these glued down into a nice thick bed of petals. In this next step, I experimented with spray adhesive. This was not my finest moment. In the future, I'll probably stick to PVA glue for stuff like this. Anyway, this whole Fabulous Marines collaboration is being done to raise awareness and funds for the Trevor Project. The Trevor Project is an organization that runs a crisis and suicide prevention hotline for young people in the LGBTQ+ community. Adolescence can be a difficult time for anyone, but it's way tougher for our friends and family who have to deal with bigotry on top of everything else. It's important that the people in our lives know that we love them. It's also important that they know professional help is available if they need it. We all need help sometimes. If a person has the courage to reach for help, then it's on us to make sure that help is there when they need it. I'll provide links to the Trevor Project and the page for the Fabulous Marines collaboration. There will also be a fundraiser option to give right on this YouTube video. I tried it myself and it works well. It's also good karma. I posted this marine over on Instagram and it got a lot of love. It also got a disappointing amount of hate. If bigots do show up in the comment section of this video, just downvote them and report if necessary. They aren't interested in reason and they feed off of anger. Don't feed the trolls. Now, I like to think that some of these trolls may yet mature into functional adults. There's always a path back from hatred, but there's no way for us to speed that along in the comment section of a YouTube video. If you want to show that love is stronger than hate, spend your energy reading up on the Trevor Project and boosting the signal. And if you're able, consider donating. There's a fundraising link right on this YouTube page. And of course, you should check out the other Fabulous Marines. The colors of pride are a very nice palette. A lot of great painters have been participating, especially over on Twitch. You can see the finished pieces on Instagram as well. 2021 is the first year of Fabulous Marines, but I have a feeling that this will be a perennial event in our hobby community. And here's Artemis all finished. I glued a lot of flowers to his rhino. Then, I fixed the worst of the damage that I caused with the spray adhesive. The white flowers ended up being a good choice, because I could come in with ink and add some splashes of color. It ended up looking somewhere between a float and a cake, but that's alright. Of course, this piece is probably gonna shed flowers if it gets handled too much, so I'll try to find a nice shelf for it. I'll just take it down on special occasions to join the parade. Anyway, that's Fabulous Artemis. Happy Pride, be good to each other, and thanks so much for watching.